Hi guys, welcome to the Angular Coder. I am Gaurav and I am your host today for Web Workers. This episode is most about how you can build super responsive web applications which can run on any kind of mobile devices, even very poor ones. Today we are going to talk about three main things. Web workers, what are that and how we can use that, how we can implement that in Angular and what we have to do for that. Third is how we can integrate that in our design. I will show you live code for that, how that design can be achieved, how you can make that framework a start of it. Let's have some fun, shall we? Let's start. Please watch this video till the end so that you get complete idea about web workers. If you skip in between, I am sure there will be a lot of things which you can miss while we are using web workers. Let's quickly dive into code without wasting any more time. So right now you can see in our screen we have a blank app component, and let's start creating a screen where there will be a small animation and there will be a button. When we click, there will be a long command which will run, and I will explain you what I am doing throughout the way while pausing the video. So right now what I have done is I have just created a basic structure where we have a button which will click, and that will create a long operation, and then we have container and slider. We'll see that in a moment. What I have done here is I have written an animate frame. I'm using animation frames to do the animation because that is most optimized way where in JavaScript code or Angular code you can do animations through. So when an application is initialized, I start doing animation, and then inside this method what I am doing is I am going to move the box to the right side or to the left side. I'll move the box to the right side until it reaches to the length of 560, and then I'll start moving it to the left side. So this is what this code is, and then I'm again calling this request animation frame. So for each frame I am going to call this method whenever there is an animation frame given from browser. So we can see that the animation is moving towards the end, and then it will bounce back and reach to the beginning. Now what we have to do is we have to create a very expensive operation. So let us create that. So I've created a long operation dummy method where basically we record the start time, and then we have an infinite loop where we keep on getting the current time, and then we subtract the current time millisecond with start time millisecond. This value of gives milliseconds, and then we check that whatever interval what we have passed, consider if we have given 2500, then this will keep on subtracting until it reaches 2500 milliseconds, the difference between current time and start time. Until that it will keep our single thread busy so that we can see if our UI gets stuck. So let's save it, and now let's check if it works. So if I click this, you can see the UI is stuck, right, and the counter is 1. If I click it again, UI is again stuck until counter is given 2. So all animations and everything is stuck. So I have made few changes so that it becomes more visible. So now you can see when we move our mouse over button, there is a hand pointer, When I click it, the hand pointer doesn't change back to cursor until 2500 milliseconds. So again we click it, the whole UI is stuck for 2500 milliseconds. Now let's talk about web workers. On a single thread, when you are working, as you saw, when you do any operation, the screen gets stuck because JavaScript is a single threaded language or single threaded application. If you want to have super responsive UI, many of the phones which people are using are very low grade phone, right? They don't have that much multi-processing or even that much CPU to support your browser. So in that case, what you should do is use web workers. Whenever you call a web worker or instantiate a web worker, it will instantly create a new thread. So it's like creating a new thread in another language. What happens when you create a new thread? Let's first code and then I will go into details what happens when we create new thread and what happens, how communication is done between that. So there in Angular, by the way, we have an easy way to do it. We have to use ng command. So let me stop the program here. So what it did was it changed few of the files. It created a configuration for worker for Angular. So you don't have to worry about how configurations you have to do. It even created the worker file and it updated the JSON file. So you don't have to worry anything about. So it created a new file called longoperation.worker. So it has updated the longoperation.ts. Alright, so what it did was, since we named the file as longoperation, it updated the similar looking file in our code. So earlier we only had one export function where we were doing longoperation. Now we can see that it has added some piece of code where it is checking if worker is undefined. There are cases where worker is undefined. When you are using SSR and stuff, worker will be undefined. You have to use backup for that. We'll go into that maybe another video. This is out of scope for this one. So let's simply remove this and let's consider that we always have our worker present in our application. Generally it is supported by all of the browsers, so it will be present. So let's just copy this code from here and paste it in component. Let's create a method. Alright, so we have a worker here and then let's try to use that. First of all, we will not make any changes. We'll just simply run this code and call this guy from ng on after ng on it. Alright, so our application is built and you can see we made a communication to worker and worker sent us a response back. Let's change the code so that now we call longoperation in worker and then use it in our code. Alright, so we have our file ready. Let's hope it works. So if I click on longoperations, you can see animation is going on and then we got our result. So even if we were doing a while loop with infinite while loop for 2500 milliseconds, even then our mouse is changed, animation is going on and then our counter is also updated. So we can see that counter is not getting updated here second time. So let's just check that once. So because we are creating new instance of worker every time, counter is not getting updated. We can just change that. We have to maintain counter outside the code there. So when we click this now, we'll see the new counter operation done every time. So if we keep on clicking, if we click 3 times, it will do operation 3 times in background. So as you saw, counter increased by 3 times. So let me explain what is happening here, what web worker is. So as I called this line, right, when I'm asking browser or application JavaScript, whenever we are asking that create a new worker, what it is doing is in the parameter for this constructor of worker, you need to pass a URL. Right now what we are doing is we are getting the URL of this component and then appending of this folder and then appending longoperation worker into that. One consideration in Angular you have to take is that wherever you are going to use worker, you should have URL and everything done in same file. So if you are planning to move the logic of creation of worker into another file, that design will not work with Angular currently. You need to, even if you pass the file name and import meta URL to another file, and when you say new worker, it will not work. Angular cannot do the compilations correctly, and that's why your code will not work. So you have, wherever you are going to use worker, you have to create in that same file, right? We'll go into design with a little bit more. So after worker has been created, worker has basically two ways of communicating. Just there is one more, that is for error cases, but for basics there is just two. One thing is you are sending information to worker, and then second thing is you are getting information from worker. Again, two ways, sending and getting information. So there is something called as post message, and then there is something called as on message. On message is something like an observable or event, where you basically subscribe to it. You say, when I am receiving message, what I am going to do with that data which I received. Okay, on message has a message event as a parameter inside this. So message event, right now we have deconstructed the object and only taking data out of it, but message event contains other parameters also if you want to use that. Data will contain the exact data which you have sent from worker to where. So in this case we are passing first of all that interval to the worker. Then inside worker we are calling our long operation as we do in normal TypeScript code. You can write your classes in this one, in this worker file. You can write any kind of structure, but you have to listen to a message like a window. By the way, no DOM operations are possible in worker. Just remember that you cannot manipulate DOM here. So the context of this dot things will not be present here. So you are just receiving a context of data which you have sent, and then in that data you can do changes, and then basically a copy of that data will be sent back. You don't have call by reference here. You will always have call by value. So you received data, you did the long operations, this thread was busy, and then you said whatever response I got, I am sending it back. So our main component code then has this on message thing which will update our result. Now this was for introduction and beginner level. Now we will go into more advanced, how you can use this information for your design. How should we design our application so from beginning so that it uses web workers at the core. There is a particular way which I kind of came up with, where it's easy to work with workers because we do understand observables, and what I've done is created a way where communication can be done with a worker in an observable way, and we have also created different kind of services to work with it. So watch the video till the end to know what I have done here. So let's start coding now. So let me first explain what I have written here. This I have already done some part of this code. I'm reusing that. So I have something called as worker util, which can just create the custom worker object. We are creating workers to do some work, and in that case what I have done is converted the code into an observable format which is strongly typed. So you can send some data and you can expect some data type back. It's very simple code. If let me try to explain that. So create is just creating the wrapper over custom worker object through that constructor, and then I have whatever code I wrote there to listen to worker, I have written inside this listen to worker. So we are writing this.worker.on message, and then whenever we are receiving any data, we are sending the response back to the person who has requested it. Why I did ID was that I wanted to use observable. So when response comes back and when request was sent, it's totally disconnected. Worker can return back data anytime. So in that case, what I'm doing is when I'm sending request, I'm recording an ID and keeping the subject with me. When response is received, I am checking that I have ID with me. If I do have ID, I get the respective subject and then just call the next and complete operation as I am doing here. So in that case, this becomes very easy. Your outer code does not need to know how it is executing, what it is executing, what are observables. It will just call execute and then subscribe to the data. So let's see how easy it becomes. So we'll simply say custom worker equals to worker util dot create worker. So that's it. We call custom worker and then we'll simply say custom worker dot execute. Inside that execute we'll give the type which we are sending and type which we are going to receive. So we are going to send a number and we are going to receive a string, and then we'll execute by sending the number 2500 milliseconds or interval. Right, so let's just subscribe to it and we got a response back. Let's just set this dot, and this worker is, since it is persistent, we can create this on constructor or ng on init anywhere. What we made is broken down into two things. So we created a structure around how workers are created and how methods can be called in them, and then what we did is in worker also we introduced some structure so that every response is recorded and converted into observable. So this is one of the design which I strongly suggest to follow, is observable pattern to work with. So what we are doing here in app component is, first we are creating the constructor, the worker as we were creating before. Then what we did is we wrapped our worker in our own framework where we have a custom worker. This custom worker has a method called as execute which returns an observable. This guy, in this you have to give first generic item as with what kind of data you are going to send in, and second thing is what kind of data you are going to receive back. So you can see even without giving any type, we know that response is going to be a string. So this thing brings in strong typing when communicating with workers. Then we can simply set, I have simply set the result as response. So our people who are using the code or the workers, that place it becomes very easy to understand. Inside worker, what we did was, just before sending back the response, we added the ID so that our custom wrapper can understand what ID was sent from request. So now obviously there is an improvement to be done here. This wrapping of response, posting message from worker, can also be converted through a wrapper which we write for all the workers which we are going to use. So you can basically create a wrapper here at this for a worker and then use that wrapper to communicate with parent. And in that case, your worker code and your main code becomes very simple. Even you can add the logic to call a specific method of the class. You can create classes, you can do lot of things. You just need the wrapper. What kind of wrapper you write between worker and parent. Once you do this tooling, once you are done with this framework, it becomes really easy. So instead of using services or inside services, you just create service as a proxy. All of the services will call worker to store data, to display data, and to manipulate data. Whenever any data is requested, you can call worker thread to send you back. So except for any presentational logic, you can move and communication logic between components, you should move all of your code into workers. Move them completely into workers and free up your main thread. There is no issue with having that much free space on your main thread, and there is no delay between when you are communicating with worker. It is almost same as you are calling methods or stuff. So adding, and then for each service, since you have multiple threads, now your applications will become much faster than it was before. This increases the performance and increases the efficiency of your code. Okay, so that was about web workers. Please do subscribe to this channel, because there are a lot of videos coming in your way where we improve performance, but also there are videos coming in where I will talk about Angular application development from a point of complete beginner. It's coming very soon. Also on this channel I talk about a lot of things related to UI, but it's not exactly about coding. So please do subscribe for those content too. I will post few times a week. Thank you for watching this video. See you tomorrow. Bye bye.